This week, it's an EV, an EV9. It's a bit of an old odd bod, this EV9, isn't it? It's big, it's bold, it's square, it's basically a fridge with a freezer attached to the front of it. There's not a lot you can do with a two-box design, but look at what they've done to this. This looks sensational. This huge swish of a daytime running light. But above all, it's the imperious size of this thing that strikes you. It is absolutely enormous. It's a full-size 3-row SUV. Now, to give you some idea, that's what a Toyota Land Cruiser is, the full-size Land Cruiser. And this is intended to be in that vein. And like most Land Cruisers, this won't go off-road. It does have off-road programs, but you're not going to take it off-road. The most vulnerable part of an SUV is the floor, and that's also where the battery is. Pierce the battery on a rock and it's all over Red Rover, possibly for your entire car. There's a small frunk in the front. You can see these massive square wheel arches that work really well on a large SUV, but they're also the same as on the new K4, which is the small sedan. Doesn't work at all well on a small sedan. There's 3 models in the range altogether, and this is the middle one. You've got Air, Earth, and so of course the top one is called GT line. And like most new cars, this has got an automatic unlocking system and start. And you can also lock it from the fob. So if I come up to the car with my hands full of groceries and the key in my pocket, the handles will pop out. Or I can do it manually with this. And they go down nice and flush. The back is where this thing looks most imperious. It's got an automatic function, of course. But despite the size of this thing, it isn't actually very tall. And that's the other thing. Not only is it not very tall, but that means the floor's not that far off the ground, yet the seats are at bum height. I'll show you that in a minute. Inside, there are a plethora of handy things like the household socket, the seats to let the second row down and tumble forward, a 12-volt outlet, and look, under a cover, they've got the button for the back door so that you don't close it by accident. There are air conditioning outlets for every row, USB outlets for every row, cup holders and bottle holders for every row. This is the 3rd row seat that you raise by pulling this like so, and then locking it by pulling the headrest back. The rear, even with the 3rd row up, for a change has some luggage space. I've got the 3rd row down, so this is absolutely enormous. But look under here. This is the compartment that holds your bits and bobs, the tyre inflation kit and what have you. But look, this is your cover that you would put in behind the 2nd row to cover up your luggage. But you can't get it out unless you pull up a piece of bodywork. And you've got to do that both sides, which strikes me as very strange indeed. As well as the button inside to close, there's a close and lock and a close button here. Have a look at the size of this door and have a look at the size of this space. Absolutely huge. There's a button here that'll tumble the seat forward so that you can get into the 3rd row. Now, there is a bit of space with the 3rd row up, but you really can't put that up from here. You've got to go and put that seat up from the back. Slightly annoying. Let's get this back. There's also a button on the back of that seat, and of course this leather look fabric is not leather. Getting in is very, very easy. And you find yourself sitting in a cavernous space. You can adjust the backrest, as I said. Again, another air vent, and I like the fact that they've made the seats a little bit sculptural. There are buttons so the passenger in the back can move the passenger front seat forward, and there are USB-Cs on either side of the front seats. And handy map pockets. Not that anybody uses maps anymore. I'm just going to point out a couple of things before we set off. This huge console is freestanding. It's not actually attached to the front of the car. We've got USBs down the front, a 12-volt outlet as well. The climate controls are just here. And that's the ones that you can see and touch easily, and they're physical buttons. But this whole section of floating tablet is also air conditioning controls. And that's where the air conditioning on off and the temperature controls sync, outside airflow and all of that sort of stuff. That's where all that is. There's a 12.3 inch screen in front of me, another 12.3 inch screen over here. And of course, Kia and Hyundai and Genesis now have wireless Apple CarPlay. And it's got lots of quirks. For example, the gear lever is down here on a third stalk. It's got the forward and back toggle, plus a park button, plus it's got the EV start, the on-off button. There's a little thing here that watches the driver to make sure that your hands are on the wheel and that you're paying attention. These buttons along here, it just looks like it's part of the dash, but they are in fact touch buttons. And if you touch them, there's a bump, there's a haptic feedback. And you can reconfigure this screen in a couple of different ways as well. Hardly worth doing. What I am going to do, oh, and there's no head-up display, which I would think for $106,000, I would expect one. Then we come to the vexed question of range. This has got a just under 100 kilowatt hour battery, which of course weighs a lot, 566 kilos. I've just been doing chores. I've been going to the shops, I did an airport run and so on and so forth. And I've used up just over 30%. I've used up 32%. And that proves to me that I would only need to charge this based on that every 2 to 3 weeks. But you can use 350 kilowatt fast charging if you want. The iPedal is on the paddles, and that's also your regeneration. Let me go right up to iPedal. I now have switched on. And I'm ready to set off. The first thing I'm going to do is to turn off these speed sign warnings. Whoever's had this car before me has already programmed the star button, and that brings up this screen, which you have to do every single time. Otherwise, this thing beeps at you and beeps at you and beeps at you and beeps at you. Drives me bananas. This is an all-wheel drive car. Why they just didn't make it 150 per axle, I don't know, but anyway, they didn't. Handling is, this is huge. It's a 2.5 ton car, and it feels like a 2.5 ton car. It doesn't have fancy suspension. It's just McPherson struts at the front and multi-links at the back. So it doesn't squat or do anything amazing like that. I am going to just go into sport mode though, because this is a pretty busy. Now 0 to 100 for a car this big is actually pretty reasonable. On most road surfaces this just glides. I want to touch briefly on the driver and safety aids. Of course it's got the full suite of ADAS, which is the driver assistance and safety suites that all new cars have to have if they want 5 stars. Both the steering and the lane departure are on. I'll activate. All right. I've got the steering now. That was the system telling me my eyes weren't on the road ahead. Just a little bit picky. Audio in this. It isn't bad, but the top one has Meridian. And I think this one should have had Meridian as well. Back to the ADAS features. The ADAS, as I said, is very intrusive, and the Lane Keep Assist is the second version, so Lane Keep Assist 2. And it's supposed to be even more precise. It even works on bends. Now, presumably they mean subtle highway bends. Then we come to the fact that the EV9 is much awarded. It's won awards all over the place for design and innovation. So let's wrap it up. EV9 is vast. Everything about it is vast. The price is vast. It's got a 3.1 metre wheelbase and it's just over 5 metres long. And because there's no internal combustion engine, the space isn't wasted trying to fit oily bits in. There's clever technology. The next one up also has the digital rear view mirror. It's incredibly comfortable. It uses some recycled parts. The information is nice and clearly displayed. And I do like the central air conditioning section. Much better than the two-way bit Kia used to have, which shared its buttons with the navigation system, so you were never quite sure what menu you were in. And of course there's an app, so you can operate some parts of your vehicle from the app, and you can remotely monitor your vehicle as well. That's all this week from the Kia EV9. I didn't expect to love it quite this much, but I do, and I can see why it's won so many awards. As always, hit like, leave a comment, and just over there to subscribe.